not going to allow 25 years of San Francisco policy be dictated by one event, meaning the murder that they had in their city. What do you think about that? And you live there. Do you think San Francisco should be a sanctuary city where federal law doesn't apply, which means right? So should they pick and choose which laws they're going to comply with and which ones they're not? Well, right, but what do you think about an elected official within your city basically saying, no, we're not going to do that? Yeah, but yeah, should she be arrested? Uh-huh. Right. So she says, "Hey, we don't care what the feds are going to say. We're going to continue to be a sanctuary city and let illegal immigrants out and not cooperate with federal officials trying to enforce immigration policy." I think it's a disgrace, particularly since there was a murder in that city perpetuated by a criminal alien who had a criminal history, felony convictions. The Immigrations and Customs asked the sheriff's department to hold this individual, to not release them, and they released them anyways because of the policies of that city. And look, I think the city of San Francisco has some culpability and some liability in that death. I was absolutely sickened that the Congress couldn't even pass a bill, a Cates Law, that they attached that law to the defunding of these sanctuary cities instead of having them on two separate votes. Bill O'Reilly talked about it. Was it yesterday on his show, I believe, and brought up an excellent point. And then today to have the video surface of the representative out there, or the member in San Francisco, basically saying we're not going to let radical Fox News or anybody else dictate what we do in our city because of one event, basically completely minimizing the murder that happened in their city at the hands of this violent criminal alien, somebody who shouldn't have had a gun. So gun laws wouldn't have helped you there. You know, just ridiculous. Absolutely crazy to me. You know, San Francisco is there are some beautiful parts of San Francisco, and there are some great companies in San Francisco to work for, and you're evidence of that. You have an amazing job, and that company sounds phenomenal. Not quite as phenomenal as SHR Media, but just about. But because we have beer in the fridge here too, we do. But right. But the thing about San Francisco, I spent some time there a few months ago, and I remember walking out of my hotel, and there was literally transients and homeless people and drugs and like literally all over the sidewalk right outside. And I was not in a cheap hotel. Like I was in a very nice hotel in downtown San Francisco. You know, this place was billed as being very nice, blah blah blah, got X number of stars. Yeah, no, it was. They do. And how do you pay for that? I mean, yes, there are some people who legitimately are disabled, and there are programs in place for that. But San Francisco has had really, really liberal policies for such a long period of time that do you think that's contributing to that homeless population? That, I mean, that. Right. Right, which would make them homeless by choice, and I think that there's that a large segment of the homeless population flocks to liberal cities because of the amount of money that is thrown at them, and typically there's in San Francisco. Oh, they walk right by them, but I'm talking the services. Yes, yes, the services that are available to them in terms of food, in terms of needle exchange programs, in terms of all kinds of things, and they're tolerated. There's no vagrancy laws that are enforced. There are no illegal camping laws that are enforced. They use the exterior of buildings as latrines, which causes a public health concern. So what about the tax dollars now spent on sanitation and cleanup on a daily basis? I mean, you've seen the people out there cleaning those streets in San Francisco just to keep the odor down, or you're walking through the streets and you smell that urine. Yeah, and that's my point. There is so much money that the city allows to be spent on that, and that's just cleaning up after them. Something as simple as cleaning the sidewalks or hosing the streets down. We're not talking about the other services, feeding, food, shelter for some segments of the population, not all, just because there are so many. The health care that's available to them, the needle exchange programs, all of these things, and some of them are private money, which is good. I'm a big supporter of helping out private donations, private funds, but there are a lot of tax dollars that are spent on that. And some of the policies that are put in place with the city. I just got a text message from Sean. He must have got the phone down. But he wants me to announce to our listeners, our Spreaker listeners, to go to www.shrmedia.com and click the player. Spreaker is having issues. Apparently there's issues all over the place. This is what happens when you people leave Sackhead Clint in charge of the tech. Hang on. Hang on a second. For our listeners, I'd like to introduce a stranger. Sackhead Sean is on the air now. Sackhead Sean, welcome, sir. So you're gonna have to listen back to the surprise Sean segment because you missed it. And it was a good one. I actually liked it. I liked the segment. I don't know what just happened, but the sound just literally blew up in my ear. It was ridiculous. So the surprise Sean segment, it was actually a surprise from Sean for our viewers, and the surprise was that you were actually right for one time. Yeah, so I accomplished two things. Number one is I surprised our viewers with the fact that you were actually right about something. Number two, I take the wind out of your sails for you to be able to brag about it, because now you can't, because it's already a segment that's been concluded. And I went on to defend my position to where I'm not done, because if Hillary gets indicted, I think the Dems are going to flock back to Uncle Joe. So all in all, it was still a victory for me, so I want to thank you for not being here to allow me to pull that off and completely deny you your bragging rights. Right. Hey, I'm going to totally nail it because I'm going to fake a major malfunction here in about 3 minutes when we go to break and not come back on. I have 168. Hang on. I have 168 grain jacketed hollow point that says I can destroy a computer. What's that? I know. This is my point. He literally, I don't know how he did it, Sean, but he literally took operational control. He's like, okay, go to this. Okay, open this. Okay, take your hands off, lift up, and I see like things start opening up on the screen. And I was like, Sako, I think the computer's possessed by Satan. And he says, no, I'm in control. And I said, oh my God, Satan, is that you? It, it was. Thank you. I tried, and the best part was, Sean, I would hit the Y button because he says, okay, type in what is my IP. So I said, okay, what is my, and I'd hit the Y button and it would shut down. And I'm like, okay, that's bizarre. So I'd open it back up, and same thing, I hit the Y button and it would shut down. I go, Sako, every time I hit the Y button, it shuts down. And he says, you're kidding me. And I said, no, I'm serious. I said, have you ever heard of that? He goes, no. So he sounded like he thought I was full of it, that I was doing something really ridiculous. So I actually took my phone and I videoed it. And I sent it to Sako as proof that I am not a complete moron when it comes to tech. No, hey, we're already past that segment. We're moving on. We're moving on. Go ahead. Hey, we're up against a break. When we come back. Well, hang on, and not only that, but I took a video of it, of a malfunction that I, in fact, did not induce, and forwarded along to our tech folks. That's a big deal. Right, our tech folks being Sako. Why do you always have to minimize everything I do, Sean? And the weird thing is I usually don't slam it into my face. I usually slam it into the mirror because I get confused which one I actually need to hit with it. No, it actually acts as a brake. It's so perfectly shaped and aerodynamic, which brings me to another story. I have a motorcycle, and I have to ride with my visor down, or else the wind catches my nose and I can do like a right or left turn just by turning my head. It's ridiculous. When we come back, I want to talk about Jimmy Carter and his actually helping the Russians in Syria. All this and more when we return on the SHR Media Network. And we're back after the break. I'm Sackhead Clint. On the phone, we have Sackhead Sean and Sackhead Sacco, starting half hour number 2. Gentlemen, they might have left me. So, before the break, I talked about Jimmy Carter offering help to the Russians. And the story came out today from the Washington Free Beacon, but yes, it did, just today. There you are. What happened to you, little fella? You guys are listening, you're like, hey, Clint, I'm here. Clint, I'm like, no. Oh no, I didn't think it was a big deal, because you should see what I'm blasting out all over the interwebs on the line while you guys have your little powwow. So, right on the line, a quote from one of my from a great movie, The Interns. So Jimmy Carter and President Vladimir Putin are, I don't know if they're buddies or chums or whatever, but they both like fly fishing. I think when Putin fly fishes, though, he's actually like hanging off the bottom of a MiG-29, and he skims the water at like 10 feet or maybe 4 feet, and he reaches down with his arm and picks up a fish. I think that's his definition of fly fishing. Jimmy Carter, I think, actually literally tries to catch flies with his tongue, because he looks like a turtle. Or a frog, some kind of amphibian reptile thing, I don't know. But anyways, they both call it fly fishing. So the war in Syria is going on, and the United States obviously backs the rebel group. Russia is bombing this, is backing the Assad regime. And Jimmy Carter said, and this is a quote, he's talking at his Sunday school class in Georgia, and NBC News was the first one to air his remarks, and he says, quote, I sent, referring to Vladimir Putin, a message Thursday and asked him if he wanted a copy of our map so he could bomb accurately in Syria. And then on Friday, the Russian embassy in Atlanta, in Washington, called down and told me they would very much very much to have the map. So in the future, if Russia doesn't bomb the right places, you'll know it's not Putin's fault, but it's my fault. And what he's referring to is there is in his particular library, they have detailed maps of certain locations in Syria, and so Jimmy Carter basically offered these maps that he has, that his group created, to Russia so that they could more accurately bomb the rebel forces supported by the United States. No, I don't know that. He might have given them. A map of Israel or of Georgia, like not the country but the state. I don't know. Listen, he was one of the most successful two-term presidents of our time. Wait. I think the term is douchebag. I'm looking at a picture of him. He looks like the turtle from Bugs Bunny and the Turtle, the Race, the tortoise and the hare. Cecil. President Jimmy Cecil Carter. Okay.
Just so we're clear on that. I don't want anyone to screw it up thinking. So a couple things about this. It's amazing how when a member of Congress, and you've seen this a couple months ago, reaches out to a country for any sort of political association or agreement or whatever, and they immediately prosecute the former president and start offering technical and potentially dangerous information to a country that I would consider to be an enemy once again to talk about war in Russia, and nothing.
They're not really a declared enemy right now though. So he is providing material support to a group that is in direct opposition of U.S. backed forces. He's really walking a fine line. Carter came out earlier and he's expressed support for Russia in the past for what they've done in Ukraine. And I mean, Carter is clearly out of his freaking mind. Well, he is, but he's helping the other side. The Carter Center, which is how these maps were created, and I have no idea how these maps were created. I don't know if he has his own stinking satellite or what. I have no clue. But the Carter Center created these maps, and then he calls Putin and says, hey, you want some really good maps of where all the rebels are? So first of all, how can a private foundation get better intelligence than the Russians? I think that's pretty funny in and of itself. Hey, Putin, it just shows that capitalism works, and communism not so much. But then to supply this so that forces could be hit, the U.S.-backed forces could be hit. Yeah, I mean, yeah. If we had our troops that were in the way, yeah. Look, the Department of Defense declined to comment about if the Pentagon actually knew that Jimmy Carter was talking to Putin. Weird. The Russian embassy also declined to comment when the Washington Free Beacon asked. So nobody's saying anything. That tells me they knew.
Yeah, they do, and then if they didn't know, they would say we're not aware of that, we're looking, which is a canned response, even when they do know something about it. So the fact that they've all declined to comment on it tells me that it's probably pissed somebody off. And you know, it's almost like they're trying to somehow, like, basically say, like, hey, you know what, I screwed up the Iran hostage thing. Let me try to jump into this so we can save some rebels. These are so stupid, naive, never realized the Russians were bombing the rebels from that place.
Oh no, I think he knows. He knows damn well.
Oh, I know. Well, can I get that second point?
Yeah.
Barney knows damn well, as you just said, and he's just really trying to appeal to the communist socialist lunatics in Russia, almost like the UN, like he's waiting for some threat war, so he'll know. And no matter what, war was never trying to
it's not really technical information, but it certainly is map locations of where the rebel forces are. And these forces, again, backed by the U.S., but there's... Look, I'm certainly not going to call it treason at this point. Is it criminal? I don't know. Perhaps. It might not be, but maybe it is. Is it morally wrong? Well, absolutely it is, particularly as an American, particularly as a former American president, to be engaging in this behavior. Look, if the Russians can't get the maps of where the rebels are, and we're not backing them. Look, it'd be different if you said, "Hey, we know where ISIS is, right? Here's the maps of ISIS." But when it's, "Hey, we know where the rebels are. You want a map?" What's Putin going to say? What's Putin going to say? No. We just want to make sure that they could bomb accurately in Syria. So then his final remark's interesting, right? If Russia doesn't bomb the right places, you'll know it's not Putin's fault, but it's my fault. Okay, smartass. So, if the Russians bomb a hospital, what you're saying is it's your fault. So, based on your own admission, should you be held accountable for war crimes? Should you be held accountable for the death of X number of innocent people? Should you be held accountable for the death of potential U.S. forces, if there are any consulting there with the rebels? So, I read this story and I about lost my stinking mind. So, in a completely unrelated story, because that's what I like to do, I would like to read something to you, and I would like you to tell me. We're going to play a little game called "What State Is This From?" You ready? I think Sean dropped out of the chat room. I think Sean is attempting to call back in. Why do you keep hanging up on us? Here's what you do, and I learned this from Sacco. Open up your screen. Twist the Pogo piston turbo inverted piston tube to 47.3 degrees. Point the entire thing north-northwest and stand back. Let me know when that's done. So I don't know where you cut out, but we're going to play a little game. Again, completely unrelated to what we were just talking about. But we're going to play a game called "What State Is This Law From?" And the section I'm going to read from, I came across this, I have no idea why, but it talks about the disqualification from holding public office or employment. And I'd like to read something to you here, and it says, "The legislature of the state of finds that A, there exists a worldwide revolutionary movement to establish a totalitarian dictatorship based upon force and violence rather than upon law. B, this worldwide revolutionary movement is predicated upon and it is designed and intended to carry into execution the basic precepts of communism as expounded by Marx, Lenin, and Stalin." Again, this is actual law. I am reading you verbatim from a state within this union. C, pursuant to the objectives of the world communism movement, in numerous foreign countries, the legally constituted governments have been overthrown and totalitarian dictatorships established therein against the will of the people, and the establishment of similar dictatorships in other countries is imminently threatening. The successful establishment of totalitarian dictatorships has consistently been aided, accompanied, or accomplished by repeated acts of treachery, deceit, teaching of false doctrines, teaching untruth, together with organized confusions, insubordination, and disloyalty, fostered, directed, instigated, or employed by communist organizations and their members in such countries. D, within the boundaries of the state of there are active, disciplined communist organizations presently functioning for the primary purpose of advancing the objectives of the world communism movement. which organizations promulgate, advocate, and adhere to the precepts and the principles and doctrines of the World Communism Movement. These communist organizations are characterized by identification of their programs, policies, and objectives with those of the World Communist Movement, and they regularly and consistently cooperate with and endeavor to carry into execution programs, policies, and objectives substantially identical to programs, policies, and objectives of such World Communism Movement. Whew, almost done. One of the objectives of the World Communist Movement is to place its members in state and local government positions and in state-supported educational institutions. If this objective is successful, propaganda can be disseminated by the members of these organizations among pupils and students by those members who would have the opportunity to teach them and to whom, as teachers, they would look for guidance, authority, and leadership. The members of such groups would use their positions to advocate and teach their doctrines and teach the prescribed Communist Party line, group dogma, or doctrine without regard to truth or free inquiry. This type of propaganda is sufficiently subtle to escape detection. There is clear and present danger with the legislature of the state of finds it's great and imminent that in order to advance the program, policies, and objectives of the World Communism Movement, communist organizations in the state of blank and their members will engage in concerted efforts to hamper, restrict, interfere with, impede, or nullify the efforts of the state and the public agencies of the state to comply with and enforce the laws of the state of and their members will infiltrate and seek employment by the state and its public agencies. Next section, it shall be sufficient cause for the dismissal of any public employee when such public employee advocates or is knowingly a member of the Communist Party or of an organization which during the time of his membership knows, advocates overthrow the government of the United States or of any state by force or violence. Again, it's enough to dismiss any public employee if they're knowingly a member of the Communist Party or another organization that advocates the overthrow. So the Communist Party doesn't even have to advocate the overthrow because it's established above. What state do you think that law is written in? Uh-huh. Okay. Here's my button, I'll tell you why. Spoken from Sackhead Sean. Mm-hmm. Okay. Uh-huh. 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 So I obviously cannot choose the one in front of me. State of what? This isn't a story. This is something I stumbled across. So here's the thing. I was shocked, and I was reading this and I said, wow, this is something that a very conservative government would put in. Hey, we don't want any frickin' communists in our government, and they recognize in law that there is in fact a worldwide revolutionary movement to establish communism, that they will in fact take over the educational system, that they will in fact instill people in public office to push this agenda. And you look at how many of them actually have socialist and Marxist ideals, and they are still in office. And yet this state had the foresight to put this in, identify the problem, list the problem in law, and then canonize it so that it would never infect the government of this particular state. And I'll tell you, the public employees of this state are required to take a loyalty oath. It's just, if you're a member of the Communist Party, it's good enough. You can't be a public employee in this state. And the state is California. Yeah. Section 1027.5 of the California Government Code. And 1028 of the Government Code talks about the sufficient grounds for dismissal is knowingly being a member of the Communist Party or another party that advocates overthrow. So these sections are talking about specific people who cannot be employed by the state of California. They're disqualified from holding public office, and that certainly is one of them, including and having the oath of allegiance also. Close. This was actually written prior to the communist goals in Congress. This statute was enacted in the late 50s, and I don't recall a specific year. I read it earlier as I was actually skimming some other things, and it was enacted in, like, I want to say 1954-ish. So it was in the 1950s that it actually became law. So this was prior to the communist goals that were read into the Congress. This is back when California wasn't batshit crazy and actually had some forward thinking. But the representatives recognized what was happening. Unfortunately, they were right when they said that this type of propaganda is sufficiently subtle to escape detection, because it escaped detection. How many members of the California state legislature are perhaps socialists, or communists, or subscribe to Marx and Mao, and Stalin? And if so, why hasn't the Department of Justice or the Attorney General's office done anything about it? Do you remember? Do you remember? And I don't recall if it was in recent history. I think 4 or 6 years ago, when California, there was a push to try and remove the oath of allegiance from educators, and it failed miserably. It failed. People were like, "No way! You're out of your mind." Mm-hmm. Yeah. it's
especially right now in California.
it's already on the books though. But you're trying to say if anybody tried to enforce it, they'd be like, oh, we'll turn this one back.
But exactly, that's what it is. And that's the sad part. You know, if you listen to that, there's really nothing wrong whatsoever with that law.
Oh no! And it says, hey, communists are trying to take over, and they're doing so in a subversive way. It recognizes that. Well, they wouldn't have a choice but to enforce it, right? That's the law. I mean, they would. They can always decide what they are or are not going to file, and we both know that. But you know what I'm saying? Force the hand, right? And I don't know how you identify them. It's not like their web page on whatever their government website is says avowed communist or socialist. You know, you'd actually have to do some investigation. Oh yeah, absolutely. Did you say socialist media? Because that's a good play on words. We're up against a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about former vice presidential candidate Ryan. Ryan? For the speaker run. Ryan? All this and more on the SHR Media Network. Back in a few. Oh no, he did it. Not only that, but there's pictures of it, and it's posted all over the place. It's called allaroundthebarnyard.net, and it's actually not a hairy wildebeest. It's actually Socko that I'm chasing. Anyways, yeah, you were squealing. It was crazy. Hey, let us know when we go back on the air, Socko. I don't want anybody to hear your dirty laundry. Oh, it was amazing. And then we're like, no, you don't have to clean the sheath on that one. Like, it's not a horse. It's a Socko. Yeah. Hey, and welcome back. Sackheads Radio Show. Segment number 3. We're in rare form tonight. All sorts of technical difficulties. We appreciate you hanging out with us anyways, and kind of muddling through with us. Paul Ryan, former vice presidential candidate Paul Ryan, is being talked about as running for Speaker of the House. And he basically came out and said, I'm only going to do it if everybody's going to vote for me. In essence, which I thought was kind of and for my initial reaction to it was, wow, it is kind of a crybaby, right? My way, everybody has to like me or else I'm not going to do it. But then I thought about it, right? It kind of struck me as like very full of himself, very almost prima donna-ish, right? But then I actually thought about it. Go ahead, Sean. Right. Right. That was my initial reaction. But like almost like I'm going to take my ball and go home. And I have no idea if he has a ball or not. Like he may have a couple. I don't know. But that's my initial assessment of it. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized it's actually a smart play. Because what Paul Ryan, I think, understands is that there has to be unity on the Republican side of the aisle. They have to be united. They have to be united to accomplish anything. There has been a very conservative faction, and I consider them pretty conservative, but there has been a conservative faction that has really flexed its muscle. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing at all, so please, listeners, don't misconstrue what I'm saying here. I don't think it's a bad thing at all. I think the Republican Party does need to move back to its conservative principles. But I think what he recognized is that if there was not a candidate who could unite them, if the Republicans in the House could not unite behind a single candidate, then there was the possibility that Pistol Grip Pelosi could get the gavel again. That they may not be able to get the votes, or there would be a show of division in the party going into a presidential election cycle, and having some very important things to do in the process. So the more I thought about it, the more I realized, you know what, it's actually a smart play. Because he's generally liked and respected by the conservatives. He is, I believe, liked and respected by the establishment, as evidenced by the fact that he got the vice presidential nomination. And so I think he's the perfect person to kind of bring him together. And by him coming out and saying, hey, I will do this if you unite behind me, in essence, I think that was actually a strong leadership position to take right out of the gate. Hey, if I'm going to be speaker, it's my job to unite the party. And I am going to unite the party now before I even agree to take the chair or to run. And if you're united behind me, then I'll be more than happy to be your leader and your speaker, and I'll represent us well. And so as I had a chance to process it and digest it, I actually think it's a good thing that he came out and said that. He might have said it maybe more eloquently like I did. But I understand but I understand what I believe is his reasoning behind it.
Well, you know, it's one of those things where you with Paul Ryan. Whether you like him or dislike him, he admits that his vice presidential run and all of his third run came out.
Mm-hmm.
One of those people that supports the bill or doesn't support the bill, he jumps all over Republican vice president candidates. Now, there's been a couple of things that Paul Ryan's done that I absolutely don't agree with. You know, I don't appreciate you know, we have some stuff with immigration or immigration where I don't agree with. He's done a couple other things. I still feel that I would want this speaker. As a matter of fact, I don't think he's the person I want the speaker. But I agree with his approach to this, that, hey, we're either going to do this together or I'm not going to waste our time. I'm not going to be in this situation where, you know, I'm trying to get people who I know will go along with me, will want to do like stuff. Probably the way which Paul Ryan shows up.
You know what? Yeah, I don't. What has he voted against it on? His immigration stance has been solid. He voted in 2014. He wanted to send illegal immigrant kids back to Central America. He wants immigration reform possible, but only after the borders are secure. So unless you're talking about some kind of immigration reform, which, depending what it is, I may not necessarily be opposed to. He says he doesn't want to trust but verify, but needs to verify and then trust. He doesn't want a big, massive immigration bill. He wants a step-by-step approach. He gets an 83% rating from USBC, which means he wants a sealed border stance. He does want reform, but he's not going to give amnesty. So he has a pretty strong conservative record, voting record. And I think that's kind of balanced out some of Romney's run-in policy. One thing he was for the Patriot Act, which is one area that we disagree on. That not you and I disagree on, but that he and I would probably disagree on. So I like a lot of what he says. One thing I didn't like is back in 2013 he wanted to delay Obamacare. He didn't want to try to repeal it at that time. But I think he did that because at the time he knew they didn't have the votes to get it, so he wanted to try and do other things. But he was also somebody that wanted to hold Eric Holder in contempt over Fast and Furious too. I don't know. I know that his without amnesty for his reform without amnesty was back in 2005. Recently, he talked about immigration reform, but only after securing the border and the trust but verify, and he wanted the step-by-step approach. Those are his more. I don't know. In 2012, he talked again about demanding enforcement of immigration laws. I don't know what the amnesty thing came from. Do you have it? George Soros. Putin. Mm-hmm. It is, but like you said, I wouldn't put it past Harry Reid to endorse him just to get us to talk about it, and, like we are. I mean, look, just the fact Harry Reid endorsed him, and without knowing why, it's already a red flag for you. And I'm not saying it shouldn't be, but I think his endorsement, just thinking about the kind of douchebag Harry Reid is, he would do that just so that people like us are now talking about it. Like, well, can we really trust him if Harry Reid likes him because he liked Boner? But is that perhaps a smart move? But he also... You know, I don't think he... I'm sorry, go ahead. You know, his voting record is pretty consistently conservative. One thing, I don't think he necessarily wanted the speaker job. And I say that because speakers of the House typically don't do well if they want to seek higher office such as president. And I think that at some point in his career, he's interested in running for president of the United States. So I don't think he necessarily wanted to be speaker because he does have those loftier ambitions. But perhaps he was tapped, and perhaps he knows that he's the person that can kind of unite the party, or at least get some strong conservative support as well as establishment support. And the House Freedom Caucus announced today that they were going to back them. That they were going to back him. So he has the support now of the very conservative part of the party, as well as the establishment Republicans. And I can't think of somebody in the House that, other than Paul Ryan, and maybe you can, but off the top of my head right now, I can't think of anybody else in the House that could garner that support right now. You look at the other people who are there, Chaffetz and so forth, they couldn't garner that. McCarthy had to pull out because he was an establishment guy, and the conservative portion of the party wasn't going to support him. You have Chaffetz now says, "Hey, I'll back off. I'll support Paul Ryan." So I think he understands that he's the now. In doing that as speaker, he does have to unite the party, and that may mean pushing a conservative agenda, but also working with the Democrats on some things. Okay, so who would be a better person? I mean, we're not going to agree 100% with anybody, right? So what's you can look at Paul Ryan's voting record dating back to '99. I mean, you can go back a pretty long ways and see that he's pretty consistent on his votes on a lot of issues. or pretty consistent on his stance on a lot of issues. He may have changed a couple things like amnesty, if there's recent comments about amnesty, and in the past he's been against granting amnesty with immigration. But on a majority of the other issues, he's been pretty consistent. I think he's been around long enough to where you pretty much, you kind of know who you're getting. And again, there's no perfect candidate for anything, but I think that he didn't. And even when he was the vice presidential candidate for Romney, I thought he was a good pick, and I liked him as a vice presidential candidate. I liked him a heck of a lot more than I liked Romney. And so I think that he may not be the perfect person for us in terms of we agree 100%, but I think he's pretty darn good, and I don't think there's anybody else out there who would be able to do a better job and unify the Republican Party and steer it more back to its conservative, maybe not all the way conservative to its conservative roots, but certainly more towards the conservative roots than it has been in a long time. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, what was that? You cut out. Mm-hmm. See, I don't know. I think with our immigration the way it is now and terrorism the way it is in the world, I think that gun control is a major issue, and the ability of the American citizen to protect themselves against lone wolf terror attacks and whatnot. And I think he's excellent on gun control. Again, on Homeland Security, I'm not for the Patriot Act. He was. He did want to restrict NSA surveillance, restrict it, not totally scrap it. He certainly didn't want to scrap the Patriot Act by any means. But he's pretty good on everything else. So again, I can't let one issue on anything drive that. Again, I don't think there's that one perfect candidate. He also may be saying some of that to start peeling away maybe some of the Hispanic vote for the presidential election coming up. I don't know. Either way, if he's making amnesty comments, it seems that perhaps he's kind of flip-flopped on that one issue. But he's certainly not for open borders, let everybody in, and we'll grant them all amnesty. No, I'm not disagreeing with you. But what other candidate would you have that would be able to pull that? And that's kind of my point. I think that he is the best candidate for speaker that's available right now. I think he's the perfect person, the only one who can unite the Republican Party. I can't think of anybody else who would be able to do that. So then, let's say if he doesn't get it, if you don't want him to get it, who would you want? I mean, there can't be a vacuum there, and I certainly don't want Boehner holding on for any longer than he absolutely has to.
No, I would think Trey Gowdy.
Yeah, but he's not running for it. Okay, that's fair. And I would be behind. I would be behind you. I would be behind you on Trey Gowdy. I don't think he wants it. I don't know that Paul Ryan wanted it. I would probably agree with you. Maybe Trey Gowdy over, but Trey Gowdy, I think, is one of those who he would certainly get the conservative vote, but I don't know that he could unite the party the same way that Paul Ryan can. But particularly with. Go ahead. See, I don't think that he has the same standing with the Republicans as a whole, establishment and conservative, to be able to unite, like Paul Ryan does. We do, and this is why I think that he'll unite, but he'll still take it more conservative. Absolutely. Yeah, and do you think there's do you think he would unite it and then run it like a rhino? His record doesn't support that he would run it like a rhino. I don't know, because we'd be moving on to a break. And I'm not disagreeing with you that there's somebody else that I would like to see in there better than Paul Ryan. My only point is I think that Paul Ryan right now is the only person in Congress who could unite the party and move it to a more conservative direction. I think he's the only one who could get the support of the establishment and the conservative movement. And after his meeting today with the Freedom Caucus, I think that he obviously he got the conservative support, and that he will be able to unite along those terms. Whew. Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we may not be able to keep the House, but the more names that get thrown in there, the more that vote's going to be split. And I think that he already has shown leadership by coming out and saying, hey, I'm only going to do this if you guys unite behind me. And I think that in and of itself, like I've talked about at the top of the hour, does show leadership in that, hey, I will come down and do this. I will be your leader, your speaker, if you guys unite behind me. And that in and of itself has been uniting, because his very first act is getting everybody on the Republican side to unite behind something, and that would be his speakership, at least for the election. And then we'll have to see how he runs it. I know we closed the door. Yeah, not the kind that run the planes. Not the ones with the big horns. He ignored you. We're up against the break. I'm not saying it now. .930 block. I'm your host, Sackhead Clint. On the phone live, Sackhead Sean and Sackhead Sacco. What did I walk all over you about, little friend? What did I do, little buddy? Well, yes.
I have a story I do want to talk about. So I was reading CNN this morning, and then people other than New York City officers last night.
Mm-hmm.
They shot by an armed suspect that they were pursuing him. And so I was reading the story via CNN. So I like to read it in a couple different places just to see how they twist the what. And CNN's talking about the officer dying. One of the things he says, he talks to Joe Black,
Yeah, look, there's a war on law enforcement right now, for lack of a better term, and I think that there are certain news organizations, CNN, like you brought up, that want to downplay the numbers, because as soon as you start showing what the true numbers are, it's going to garner sympathy and perhaps more vocal support for law enforcement. I am very disappointed that the president has not come out and given a statement on this issue. He interjects himself into everything else. Go ahead. Uh huh. That's not, but I think he was black as well. Because he's at that point, the officer's not a black life, he's a blue life, and to that group, blue lives do not matter. No, I was just going to say, look, there's some news organizations that do support law enforcement. Fox News, Megyn Kelly has come out and said things about law enforcement going out risking their lives every day. And, we pray for our troops, our officers out there every day. But a lot of news organizations don't. I think that some of the more liberal news organizations identify with and clearly support the Black Lives Matter and the anti-police movement out there. I saw a great poster one time that says this group wants more law enforcement, and there's riot police, and they're screaming in the officers' faces, wants more government, and then arrow pointing to the cops, and it says more government. And I thought that was absolutely hilarious. Yeah, brilliant. But Well, there was a story that came out in Placer County here in the Colfax Cemetery. Sacramento police officer William Bean Jr. He was killed in the line of duty, and his gravestone over the weekend was vandalized. So it's sickening to me, and it's reported on. It's kind of a story that's been buried, and he was shot in 1999. He and his partner pulled over a car in Del Paso Heights, an area of the city of Sacramento, and he was shot and killed. The killer was convicted of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison with no parole. But the news story, and this news story comes from the Sacramento Bee, a rag of a newspaper in my opinion, but they don't even describe in the story what the vandalism was. All it says is... Right, and basically the word pig was painted on the police officer's gravestone. And of course, Sacramento, the Bee, they won't, put that. But yeah, somebody wrote pig in gold spray paint. There was a. Go ahead. Or excuse me. The gold spray paint was on another. There was another officer's gravestone who was vandalized in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Police Detective Sergeant Thomas. He was killed in the line of duty, and his gravestone was vandalized. So there's another gravestone that was vandalized. I'm still trying to find what the vandalism on Officer Bean's gravestone said. Yeah. So I found. And I found a story talked about what the vandalism was. You're on a delay, Sean, so I'm sorry. I can't tell if I'm interrupting you or not. I apologize if I do, but your phone's delaying. But the two badges were forcibly removed from the gravestone, and a note was left behind. Investigators are not revealing what the note said, but that's the vandalism that took place there, and then, of course, the pig on the other officer's gravestone. Mm-hmm. Right. Well, they're pushing an agenda. There's a story. There's a story breaking right now, Sean. Albuquerque, New Mexico. Another police officer has been shot outside a store. This occurred 7:45 p.m. Wednesday night at the Walgreens at Central and Eubank in Albuquerque, New Mexico. The police officer is wounded at this time. There's no other information coming out. The officer's name and current condition has not been released at this time, and the shooter is still at large. So be watching out for that story. Again, the story just breaking on the Associated Press. We're out here on the West Coast, but it's showing it's published October 22nd, 2015. Albuquerque police officer shot outside a store, suspect at large. So the story's just breaking now, and we'll see if anything breaks in the next 13 minutes or so on that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, pigs in a blanket, fry like bacon, all that stuff. It does. Like you said, who's the first people they're going to call when they're in trouble? They're going to call the cops. And you know what? Those cops are going to show up and help them because they're professionals. They're going to do their job. Even in the protests, if there's a counter protest or something, law enforcement is going to protect that group's First Amendment rights, just like they would anyone else's. Mm-hmm. It's sick. So we don't know if there's going to be much to talk about. Yeah, I don't know, man. The San Francisco 49ers are playing Seattle Seahawks tomorrow. Hey, look at that. We're out of time, folks. Chargers. And the Chargers.
I have never, well, I just never go to California. I have never been in more bandwagon-friendly place than California Raiders fans. A week ago, people were talking about Colin Kaepernick and the 49ers, including their quarterback, and literally like calling for his head.
No, wait a second. I am always a fan, win or lose. We are horrible this year, and I am still a 49er fan. So don't lump me in with the bandwagon fans.
I'm just telling you how I feel about here in but, all of a sudden, there's this one game this weekend that everything from the opener out. And now, it's a big, including the sports shows out here, like, oh, the Niners, they now have the chance to get these injuries. Kaepernick is back, blah, 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 blah.
There's no way we're taking the division. There's no way Niners are going to take the division. But I still want to watch them. It'd be like if New England was having a horrible year. You'd still watch them.
I still watch it, but I wouldn't be a hater. I would not be happy if they feel this is a terrible team. I would not be happy with the management. But there are people out there who literally were just going after like the player. Oh, this guy sucks.
Now hang on a second. You mean to tell me Boston fans wouldn't do that?
No, but what I'm saying is they weren't being anti-team. Like, people out there watching things are Niners suck, blah, blah, blah.
They do, but we're still going to root for them. They do, but we're still going to root for them. It's like the A's, right? The A's were horrible this year, but I still root for them every game. I think you're a hater because your team's not out here and they're not playing on Thursday night. That's not true. The New York Giants. I'm an American League fan. And Sacco closed the door on our show. We got everything enough. It doesn't matter at this point anyways, even if we have more topics. The door's been closed. We're out of time. Thank you for listening to us tonight here on SHR Media Network, Sackheads Radio Show. Tune in tomorrow night, 8:30, when Sean and Dan will be covering the Benghazi hearings while I'm watching football. Good night.